coaches. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, they can't hold a flame against you, ay. Blow the whistle, blow the whistle, ay. Blow the whistle, got the game, it ain't no issue, yeah. Blowing the whistle, I had enough with you, the championship, it is gone. Ain't listen to you, I can't give it to you, cause you don't know what I've been on. This is the Coaches Podcast, ripping up everything off that. Back to back is not.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Coaches Podcast. I'm your host, as always, guys, Coach Steve. We have another fantastic episode for you all today here. Continuing with our Dynasty series here with Dynasty Rewind Part 4, guys. And we will be going over those, bubble teams that almost didn't make the playoffs or should have made the playoffs and things like that in today's episode. Or they might have actually made the playoffs, actually. I don't remember. But some of them might have, some of them might have. But we're going to be talking over the most important Dynasty questions for each of these teams here and go through the motions. And, of course, we have Coach Tyler on the show today. What's going on, Coach Tyler?
What's up, guys? Yeah, glad to jump into these teams. We got some good ones today, some really good questions prompted up. So let's get into it.
Absolutely. So let's get things started here. Right. And as always, guys, if you're tuning live on our YouTube channel, we would appreciate it because we give a nice slideshow for every episode. And it's very, very fun to see the visual effects to some of the things here. I've been a little slacking on the coolness, but it's some good things to watch while you're listening to our show. So over at our YouTube channel at the Fantasy Coaches. So, all right, let's get things started here. Starting off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on our first team here. Obviously, they have their quarterback situation pretty much solved at the moment with Baker Mayfield having another fantastic fantasy season now 2 years in with the Bucs. The run game, we're going to talk about that today with Bucky Irving, who shined as a rookie, especially in that back half of the season here. Former draftees, Rachaad White, Sean Tucker, two players who White had kind of flashed a little bit, kind of lost his job to Bucky Irving, and Sean Tucker, we all know, flashed in that one crazy game against the Saints early on in the season here. Wide receiver-wise, Mike Evans is going to be back, obviously, but he is creeping up there in age. Chris Godwin is a pending free agent. I believe they pushed back his deadline, though, or whatever, to be able to re-sign him. So this look like it's going positive towards Chris Godwin potentially going back to Tampa Bay, which, again, could lead to trouble to another guy that we will talk about today, and Jalen McMillan, the rookie who kind of shined right at the end of the season, helped a lot of players get to the fantasy championship with his performances. And, of course, JK Dobbins, who at times shows off to be a really good tight end, and then sometimes just kind of just disappears from the offense in general. So, but still young tight end who has hopefully better days ahead. So let's get into our first question of the show today here. Can Bucky Irving be an RB1 in Dynasty? Obviously, we saw last year, and I kind of already mentioned a little bit, Bucky, coming in as a rookie, basically just stole the job away from Rachaad White here. Looking very good in this offense here, really got things going, especially in the back half. RB4 from weeks 12 to 17, just was someone that people just wanted to have on their team. And he helped a lot of people win fantasy championships. And it wasn't just on the ground. He also saw the passing value that he, receiving value that he offers for a team. So, Coach Tyler, how do you feel about Bucky Irving? Is he an RB1 in Dynasty right now for you?
Right now, he's right on that edge. As I look at my rankings, he, constantly just kind of jumps that line between about RB 10 for me to about RB 13, 14. So just right on that bubble of RB1, kind of tiptoeing each side of the line. I fully believe that he can be an RB1, especially in Dynasty. Like, he is 22 years old, so he's got the age factor. He is, as we see it, the assumed starter coming into what was a very confusing backfield for the most part of the first half of the season. But I think with, the offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, being gone, heading out to Jacksonville to be their new head coach, the Buccaneers just promoted their passing game coordinator to offensive coordinator. So I think this offense doesn't look exponentially different than it did this past year. And if Bucky Irving still reprises that role, which, barring the Buccaneers going out and making a giant trade in free agency, or getting, one of those first or second round running backs in the draft in April, I don't see why he couldn't be an RB1 in Dynasty. I see him as, kind of that guy that teeters the line, just because we did see a back half of the season breakout, and he is a young back, but there's also, kind of a worry on my side. He isn't, on the bigger side of running backs, comes in at 5'10", 195. The draft capital wasn't ideal. Obviously, that doesn't matter when you show it on the field, but just looking at all the factors that can go into it, I think that he can be an RB1. I still have him kind of bouncing back and forth between that RB1 line, and as the draft happens and we see where these guys end up, obviously right now, all the mock drafts that we look at, every running back is going to a dream landing spot, and that would move Bucky Irving outside of that RB1 spot. But if the draft doesn't go exactly how fantasy managers want, I could see Bucky Irving being solidly within that RB1 range for dynasty rankings this year upcoming and years going forward.
Yeah, no, Bucky's definitely a very interesting character, especially because he wasn't really highly drafted in a lot of rookie drafts last year. I think there was one draft I was able to get him for basically like free after the rookie drafts went through. But he definitely did very well overall. I like that fact that he would basically kind of took over the snaps to some extent. I think it was mostly just the carries. I think when you're looking at the stats when it comes to Bucky Irving, that like he didn't like overly like dominate in terms of like being the number one ball carrier, but being on the field, which that I think that can help him sustain his production throughout an entire season, because Rachaad White's going to be able to come on the field and help out a little bit there, allowing Bucky to kind of get that added rest that most RB1s wouldn't get. But when you look at the opportunity that he got, he saw a high opportunity in the back half of the season here, basically handling much of the workload outside of potentially plays where he wasn't really involved in, allowing, White or Tucker to come in and fill in those times where it allowed Bucky to kind of get that wrist a little bit. The fact that I like that he was someone who was also very involved in the passing game. We've always thought, Rachaad White's the pass catcher back on this team, and I think that's what it's going to be going forward, because Bucky was more the pure runner. Well, White was seeing consistent targets at the end of the season here, 5, 6, 4, 3 game in terms of targets in games at the end of the year. Like, he was being very involved. So I think there's potential for him to be an RB1. I think I have him, just like Coach Tyler said, outside of my RB1 status. I think that he may not make it there unless he can show us another good season out of him. Again, there's going to be a lot of older running backs that are going to probably fall down a little bit. Bucky's still very, really young, but this draft class will, I think, change the landscape of this running back grouping, that it could push Bucky Irving up into an RB1 status, or it could really just keep him kind of where he's at, where he's kind of flirting with RB1 status. I think he can, but I don't have him as it right now. So, all right, over to our second question here. And this is, I think, a player that a lot of people probably want to know things about, and it's Jalen McMillan, someone who really dominated towards the end of the season this past year. And he was wide receiver 11 from week 14 to 17. Really helped your fantasy playoffs. The good thing was, not the good thing, but the situation was that he had 7 touchdowns over the last final 5 games of the season here. Obviously, all his production, most of his production kind of came after Chris Godwin went down for the year. But he's a young guy, and it looks like he may or may not step into a starting role in 2025. Again, that's waited to be seen, as Chris Godwin is pending his availability to this team this year if they decide to re-sign him. But, until that happens, we don't know. But people probably are getting fantasy questions and fantasy trades involving Jalen McMillan. And the thing to know is, do you sell high on what we saw at the end of 2024, or do you hold right now, Coach Tyler?
Yeah, McMillan is honestly one of the more interesting guys to me over someone like Bucky Irving. I think if you're a contender, he is 100% a sell high. You look at most of his production did come post Chris Godwin injury. And with Chris Godwin getting injured, week 7 of the NFL season, it's not a guarantee that he is back and 100% ready to go by week 1 of the NFL season and like full speed. But at the same time, there is a high probability of that. And the Buccaneers, I saw reports even as of this morning that it's almost certain that they're going to bring Chris Godwin back. They, like you said, they moved. It was his opt-out date on his contract. So they have time to sit down and run the numbers that they need to run and do the things they need to do. But as far as I see it in my mind, Godwin's going to be back. As far as every reporter out there in the world sees it, Godwin's going to be back. And so I view McMillan as a sell high if you're a contender, just because his name value and what he did in the back half of the season will probably carry enough for you to get something that will push you either to a contending area and or over the edge if you aren't at that point already. But if you are a young team, if you're rebuilding, I am 1,000% on holding or even possibly buying Jalen McMillan, right? Because you look at this Bucs team, Chris Godwin has dealt with injuries over, the last few years. And, they do have Mike Evans, but Mike Evans is 31 years old. He's not getting any younger. And so eventually, people thought that the clock wasn't going to run out on a Javonte Adams, and we're slowly seeing that. You think the clock is never going to run out on these guys, and it will. And so, going into his 12th season, we don't know how many more years Mike Evans has left. So if you're a young team, if you're rebuilding, I love Jalen McMillan as a hold for you just because he is a 23-year-old receiver. And, Baker Mayfield isn't ancient yet. And so there's a good chance he's still there and slinging it when either Godwin is gone, if he's not re-signed, or if they do a short-term deal, or Evans is gone. In best case scenario for that, you have both of them that are gone within the next 2-3 years, and Jalen McMillan is your wide receiver one.
Yeah, no, that is actually a perfect way to break down Jalen McMillan right now in terms of his dynasty value and what you should do with it. I love that, Coach Tyler. Great analysis there. I love that. All right, so let's get over to our next team here, Denver Broncos here. Obviously, the Broncos have a lot of work to do on this offense here. Obviously, starting off with Bo Nix heading into his second season, a guy that we will be talking about really shortly here, but obviously a really solid rookie year for a player that I think a lot of people were undervaluing going into the 2024 season. Running back wise, that could be a complete change as what we see right now with Javonte Williams, Jalen McMillan, and Audric Estime. Javonte Williams is obviously a pending free agent, a guy I think we will actually mention a little bit here. But that running back core really needs another star there. But does that mean bringing back Javonte? Does that mean someone else? We'll have to wait and see what Denver decides to do on that. Wide receiver-wise, it could be good. It may not be good. Obviously, Courtland Sutton is sitting as the wide receiver one for the Denver Broncos. But, how many more years does he have left? He's an older receiver. Obviously, we've seen him deal with some injuries in his career. But then you look at Troy Franklin, who kind of flashed in the playoff game that they had against the Bills. Again, he has a connection with Bo Nix. And then Marvin Mims, again, maybe we should have talked about him, but someone who came on really strong at the end of the season there and just kind of was really fantasy relevant for a lot of us near the end of the fantasy playoffs. And then obviously tight ends, again, they don't really have a situation there with tight end. Adam Trotman's their tight end one, not somebody who is going to make a difference in fantasy. So, but let's get into the hot topic of this team here, the Broncos, Bo Nix. Obviously, we know Bo Nix had a really strong rookie season, helped lead the Broncos to the playoffs, whether or not it was him or the defense, but he still put up big games at times this year. It wasn't like, he flew by. He put up big numbers in certain games while it was kind of hot and cold at times. The hot was hot and the cold, unfortunately, sometimes was cold. But Coach Tyler, are you buying into Bo Nix rookie season? Is he someone that, all right, you know what? I found a nice young franchise quarterback for my dynasty team. I'm set. I'm set for 4 or 5 years now. How do you feel about Bo Nix?
Yeah, I'm really buying into Bo Nix as a higher end QB2 right now. I don't see him at that QB1 value just because of the weapons around him. Like you said, we saw a lot of flashes this year, and it was his rookie season. There was some up games, there was some down games. But you look at kind of what that offense was working with, right? You had Courtland Sutton get over 1,000 yards, and then Marvin Mims squeaked over 500 at 503. And then no one else was over 500 yards receiving, right? You've got Devon Vele was their third best receiver, and he hit 475 on a lot of deep targets. But, you look through the list of targets that they have. You have Sutton, you have Mims, who's shown flashes, but really has shown his best work as a returner. You have Vele, you have Lil Jordan Humphrey, you have Troy Franklin, you have Adam Troutman, you have an almost non-existent running game with guys like Javonte Williams. Like, the weapons, he definitely outplayed what was around him. And so unless there are substantial additions to that offense, I still see him as a higher end QB2, right? He did show a good amount of rushing ability this season, walked away with, I think that's 5 rushing touchdowns for the season, had multiple games over 25, 30 rushing yards. And so he was getting you points on the ground, which is integral if you're going to be a QB1 in the NFL fantasy football wise. So I'm buying into it as a QB2. I'm not going to overshoot what he is, especially with, the so-called sophomore slumps that will come. It might be more beneficial to buy him next year if this offense doesn't make strides talent-wise around him and he does hit a little bit of a slump. But I buy into him and his talent, right? All that time that he spent in college, all the jokes coming out on, he was playing football with Peyton Manning back in college, all this stuff. Like, all this time helped him to fine-tune a lot with a lot of good coaches. And I think that showed very well under Sean Payton. And so I have him as a QB2 right now. I buy into it. I might bank on buying him within, a sophomore slump possibly, but there's also a chance Denver does the draft right and they go replace the guy we're about to talk about in a second, and they go get some good receivers to back up this receiving.
Sorry, P, I didn't see that comment right away, but I'm sure one of us, between me and Coach Tyler, we definitely disrespected Adam Troutman. But
hey, I could probably put up 188 receiving yards like Troutman if I really tried. So,
oh my God, it wasn't great, unfortunately, to see that. But yeah, no, I have to put some disrespect on him. I mean, he's not getting anything. But yeah, no, I mean, I agree. Like, I like Bo Nix a lot. I think that those who got him in the second round have to be really happy with themselves in last year's rookie draft, because I know I got him. Most of the times I got him, it was in the second round, early second round. And I think that he showed us a lot with very little talent surrounding him, which gives me hope that, like, giving this man talent will unlock him to a different level that we haven't seen. He's in the offense that fits, and sometimes that's all it is needed for a player to really reach their fantasy or their talent potential, is be in a scheme that fits what they do best. And that's what Bo Nix does. Again, he was great in the air at lots of different times this season here. The rushing floor that he offers as well also gives him a little bit of a boost. Again, he's already 25. It's kind of not what you really want from your rookie quarterback. But again, fantasy is a 3 to 4 year window. I always say, no matter what, if it's, even if it's Dynasty, it's 3 to 4 year window. And having Bo Nix as your QB2, less than happy about your QB1, he's going to put up big numbers, and he's going to continue to do so. He put up big numbers against his division rivals this past year, teams who looked all great at times this year, with the Chiefs, the Chargers, the Raiders, not as much. But he played well against divisions that were a division that is really tough. And I should expect that to continue to moving forward while they build around him, whether they add a wide receiver in free agency or whether they add a wide receiver in the draft. There's going to be plenty of running backs. Someone is going to come up to that team and be able to establish the run, something they didn't offer in this offense this past season. I think Bo Nix is the sky's the limit. And this is the time. This is that window to buy now. I don't think it's overly crazy to go out there and get him. This isn't a quarterback class you want anyway. So if you're looking for a quarterback, you're in that 6 to 7 range, like going out there and going for Bo Nix isn't a bad thing to do. I think that's where you want to be. And if you're looking for a QB2, he's the guy to go out there and buy now, because going after Cam Ward or Sanders, that they're not going to get you over the top in year one. Bo Nix has already proven that he can do that. give me Bo Nix moving forward. All right, so a less interesting topic here. Javonte Williams. Oh, forgot I had to click over here to do that. Obviously, Javonte Williams, highly regarded coming out of the NFL draft 4 years ago now. In 2020, 2021, obviously looked really solid as a rookie. Everyone really wanted him to kind of just take the reins and run with it. Then he got in that nasty knee injury that, really set him back there. People were like, he's done. Well, like, and I was saying this last year, he came off a major injury. Like, give this man a year to recover from it. Thought 2024 was going to be the season where he kind of stepped up. They had the quarterback. They had an offensive scheme that I think was going to help him out a lot there. And he kind of just disappointed once again here. I mean, whether it was the lack of touches or opportunity, he just never really got things going there. The only great thing that for him is that he had career high in targets, 73 targets. But now he's going into free agency. He's a bit of an older running back now. He's still in a prime years of an RB, but this is a class that, again, isn't the greatest free agency class, but there's a lot of young rookies coming in. NFL teams might not want to take a average starter and pay him while they can go out there and get a young rookie who has tremendous upside. So, Coach Tyler, I know I rambled on just now. What do you make of Javonte Williams? And is there any fantasy value left in him, or is it just sell off him as quick as you can if you have him on your team?
Yeah, Javonte Williams was really the first guy that I ever scouted for Dynasty, really the first guy I ever took the time to watch film going into a rookie draft for. So this hurts, but I really think it's just time to sell him off. The thing with Denver, obviously Sean Payton coming in, everyone knew it was probably going to be a committee, but Javonte Williams, just name value, if you want to call it talent, whatever it was going to be the head of that committee, right? Because you have Jaleel McLaughlin and, day 3 Audric Estime behind him. So it just makes sense that Javonte is going to be that guy. But we just haven't seen really anything from him. We've seen, a couple 2 touchdown games that have vaulted him up to higher RB1 status for a week. But outside of that, it's just not a ton to be seen here. Just very inefficient, not anything exciting. And, the last thing that we see news-wise from him is that he's not expected to be re-signed by the Broncos. So if you're putting any hope in Javonte Williams, you're hoping that he somehow hits a JK Dobbins-like moment where some team signs him for extremely cheap because he's been injured and he just hadn't been outstanding, and someone's just like, hey, we need a roster spot to fill. This guy's a vet. He'll do. And then he just hits the ground running and becomes something that we hadn't seen from him since college. But I'm really just kind of in the boat of sell him off, right? Like you said, this is a big rookie class of running backs. If you could somehow get a second-round pick for this guy, I doubt you could. But if you could, go do it. If you could get anything worth taking a shot on a rookie, it might do you better to get a late pick and just have a guy sitting on your taxi as opposed to wasting a roster spot on Javonte Williams. I just don't see the world where he is overly valuable. I don't see where he signs with the team and has that JK Dobbins, boost. I think that that's just a long shot that you're hoping on. So I'm good with selling him. I agree. It doesn't matter the age. It doesn't matter what we saw coming out of college. Just at this point, it's just tiring waiting for him to be what you hope he's going to be.
Yeah. It's just the efficiency, explosiveness that he offered in his rookie season just isn't there. 40th in breakaway runs, 40th in evaded tackles. He's just turning into just an average running back, whether or not it's because of the knee injury, unfortunately. Sometimes people just don't recover the same way. And maybe it took more than just a year to really get things going. Maybe it took 2 years now. But in the same sense, what landing spot does he have? And that's the concerning thing with Javonte Williams. You either sell off now and hope that he doesn't land in a good situation, or you find that he lands as the third string running back for a team and you have absolutely no value in Javonte Williams. So sell if you can, use him to package up a couple players. I'll throw in Javonte Williams. Maybe someone's like, oh yeah, let me see if maybe he lands in the right spot. So someone might want to buy into that. So, all right, over to our next team here, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Obviously, the Pittsburgh Steelers have themselves a quarterback situation once again here. Russell Wilson was okay as the Steelers quarterback here. Really kind of didn't help them do all that much when it came time to help them win games late in the season. He was fine. He was just fine. Justin Fields obviously got to start the first 6 games of the season. Flashed a little bit, but again, I was surprised they moved away from him for Russell Wilson. But Justin Fields is still a very intriguing option, especially for Dynasty, because of the upside he offers. And if a team decides that, hey, even if we don't think Justin Fields is the future, he has upside to give this team some kind of talent. So we'll have to see how that goes for their quarterback room there, if any one of them come back or if they go for a different direction. Same with the running game room. Najee Harris is a free agent, a guy who has had 1,000 yards each season here. Surprisingly, he has more 1,000-yard seasons than Alvin Kamara does. And you wouldn't think that, but he's got 1,000 all 4 seasons. Jaylen Warren, a guy we will be talking about shortly, is a restricted free agent, I think, or something like that. He's in a weird thing, but he's able to come back on the team pretty easily. But he's still out there. Someone, again, who I think at times showed explosiveness and give this man the ball more, but the Steelers never did. Wide receiver wise, we'll talk about this guy soon as well. George Pickens, obviously flashed at times this season here. Obviously, he's a very hothead wide receiver. Outside of that, Calvin Austin, he's just kind of a guy. Mike Williams is a free agent. They have Romo Wilson too, a guy, and I wasn't really high on, but there are people that are still pretty high on him. And then Pat Freiermuth, it's just a solid dynasty tight end. He's not going to give you break weeks, but he can give you 5 or 6 points every single week if you need him to. So solid, still relatively young tight end for him. But let's get into the important questions of dynasty here. Again, you could probably mention a lot of these, but the biggest one we're going to start off with is George Pickens. Obviously, George Pickens coming off back-to-back, really solid seasons to start his career. He looked great at times. It looks like a wide receiver 1, and then he kind of just disappears in the Steelers offense at times, or he just loses his head and just starts throwing hands with every defender and every player that he could find his hands on at times. It seems like it. But what's up with George Pickens for Dynasty for you? Is he, where do you value him moving forward?
Yeah, I still keep him at that lower wide receiver 2 range, even possibly getting into wide receiver 3. I am a well-documented George Pickens hater. Anytime that man puts up a goose egg, there's a big old smile across my face. But I just don't, like you said, there's some games that he goes out and he's a wide receiver 1, and there's some games that, he's out on the field, but you wouldn't know it if you looked at the box score. And so it's hard to trust an up and down player like that, even if he is the wide receiver 1 on a team, even if he is, he has the ability to go for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns in a game, right? Because he has all the ability in the world to do that. But the problem is he can't consistently be that wide receiver 1, right? Any wide receiver 1 week that he has had in Dynasty is usually followed up with a, subpar week. There's only, let me look here, in PPR scoring, the only time he has followed a wide receiver 1 week up with another wide receiver 1 week was week 16 and 17 of the 2023 regular season. Every other week, he's either a wide receiver 3 or worse, outside of week 10, week 11 this year when he finished as a wide receiver 19 after a wide receiver 5 finish. And so I think that the value of, the name George Pickens, I think, he's the wide receiver 1 for the Steelers, and they're in on Stafford, and they aren't going to have Wilson, so they might have Fields, or they might get a rookie quarterback and figure that out. There's just too many things up in the air. For me, he gets the target share. He's the leading receiver on this team. but I can't trust him week to week. George Pickens is a great guy to have on a best ball team. Great guy to throw in your DFS lineups on Sunday if you can get him cheap enough. But he's just not a guy that I trust week to week, because even if the quarterback play is semi-consistent, he isn't. And so I still have him at that low-end wide receiver 2, higher wide receiver 3. It's just until I see actual consistency out of him that he can string weeks of this together, that's where he's going to be, because it's a dice roll on if I'm going to get a wide receiver 5 finish or a wide receiver 50 finish.
Yeah. No, that's really great points. I'm kind of on the same page. Like, I think Pickens' name value and the fact that he's like young is like attractive for a lot of dynasty owners. And again, I think it's a good time to use that as a good sell high option to go out there and get a more consistent wide receiver here. And consistency is the part of the game which you play in dynasty. You want someone who's able to put up solid numbers week in and week out. And again, you can have him, sure, but he shouldn't be your top 2 option at wide receiver. You don't want someone who's going to blow up one week and then disappear for a few weeks and then come back again and do it again. Sure, that helps you at times, but it's not consistent for dynasty. And we don't know what his situation is going to be moving forward. Do they bring in another wide receiver? Will that help or hurt him? Who do they have at quarterback? Is it Fields? Is it Wilson? Obviously, Fields, he didn't do as great. Wilson, he had a stretch of games where he was really good with Russell Wilson. Then again, does the team want him on their team? Like, is he going to be more of a distraction than anything than helping dynasty owners with fantasy? So with me, it's like, I'd rather sell high. I'd rather use that to go out there and get a Rome Odunze if I wanted to right now. Give me Rome Odunze over George Pickens. Give me DJ Moore in a second for George Pickens if I can get that. Like, I'd rather have one of the Bears wide receivers than deal with the headache that George Pickens could give us moving forward if he doesn't kind of get his act together, and if the Steelers don't really get their act going on offense right now. All right, over to the next question here. All right, obviously I mentioned Jaylen Warren before. A guy who just kind of at times really is able to put up some solid production, but it doesn't, again, same situation, doesn't seem to be consistent, whether or not because they don't want to use him in that role or it's because they wanted to use Najee Harris in more of a fashion of a heavier workload. Jaylen Warren just never really has gotten his chance to shine or show off his talents on a bigger scale. But can 25 be the breakout? Do you think that the Steelers move away from Najee Harris, just go with Jaylen Warren? Or do you think, you know what, I don't think Jaylen Warren's time is ever going to come in the Steelers offense?
I've been a guy that's held a lot of Jaylen Warren since his rookie season. I've been a guy that's been waiting for the day that Najee Harris isn't on this team so that Warren can have his opportunity. But I just don't see a world where the Steelers let Najee Harris go and just give the complete workload to Jaylen Warren. The Steelers offensive line hasn't been outstanding, really, any of the years that Najee or Jaylen has been on this team. And Jaylen has been that spark, right? It reminds me a lot, efficiency-wise, somewhat of the last couple years of Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard in the Cowboys offense, right? Obviously, a lot better offensive lines in Dallas, but it just reminds me, Zeke was getting the bulk of the workload. He was getting all the carries, and then you give it to Pollard, and he had the ability to go take it 45-plus yards and go score a touchdown. And Jaylen Warren has that ability. But the second that the Cowboys gave Tony Pollard the offense, got rid of Zeke and said, hey, this is yours, he didn't do terrible, but he didn't have that same explosive ability because it wasn't coming in every, 5 or 6 snaps. It was, hey, you're getting the ball 200 times this season. Figure out how to handle it. And so I would love few things in fantasy as much as seeing Jaylen Warren's breakout in 2025. But I also, like I said, don't think there's a world where if Najee Harris doesn't sign with the Steelers, if he goes to another team in free agency, that the Steelers aren't either bringing someone in that same free agency, which this class is kind of abysmal, but they also have the reach to go get any of these running backs in the draft. And so I don't believe that Jaylen Warren is going to be the lone wolf in this backfield. If the Steelers go get a guy in round 2 or 3 that obviously, almost puts Jaylen Warren in the same spot that he's in right now, if they go get a guy in round 6, I believe that Jaylen Warren could lead and the roles could be reversed. But it's really hard to see the world where Jaylen Warren just becomes the guy that's getting that Najee Harris workload.
Yeah, no, I'm unfortunately, again, we're on the same page a lot tonight. Last week we weren't, guys. So if you want to watch us argue a little bit more, go to our last episode. But yeah, with Warren, it's like I always like, Warren has some potential, but like I just don't think if you saw at the end of the season, they could have easily just given Jaylen Warren more work. He had a better fantasy points per game. He had 60 all-purpose yards in 7 of his last 9 games. You saw the production, you saw the opportunity to show on the field, like, hey, I know we have Najee Harris, but like Jaylen Warren needs a few more carries, but he never seemed to ever get those few more carries that he really needed to like break out. So like, what's different about this year? Is it because Najee Harris is gone, it's going to change everything? I don't think so. I mean, I think they're going to bring out someone else in, whether it's Harris or not. I mean, I know Nick Chubb has been linked there. I know they've talked about going out there and getting a rookie running back on this team here. And I just think Warren is a guy that I think is a better sell high. And I think you might want to wait until at least you find out Najee Harris isn't coming back, because I think then his value will see a bit of a spike. Because I don't think Nick Chubb signs with the team early on. If it's Nick Chubb or someone like that, like I think Nick Chubb ends up waiting a little bit. But if Harris signs not with the Steelers, Warren's value is going to go up, and that's the time to sell high on him and then expect them to go out there and get a guy in the draft, because the Steelers love getting their running backs in drafts. So wait for that to happen, and Jaylen Warren probably won't be breaking out in 2025. All right, over to our next team here, the Los Angeles Chargers. All right, quarterback-wise, obviously Justin Herbert is a really good fantasy and dynasty quarterback here, someone that you're really going to love in dynasty. You hold on to Justin Herbert. The running backs could see a big change this year. Obviously, a guy like JK Dobbins, who we'll talk about in a few, is a pending free agent right now. He looked really good finally for the first time in his career, despite even getting injured once again. Gus Edwards looked like a shell of himself this coming season with the Los Angeles Chargers. Kiami Vidal, who I was really high on going into this past year, really disappointed me and a lot of fantasy owners. Wide receiver-wise, Ladd McConkey kind of brought himself as a top 20 wide receiver in Dynasty right now. Looked really good in the slot. Looked like the wide receiver one for this team. But, do they add more talent in that wide receiver room? That might hurt Ladd McConkey. Joshua Palmer, he's just an average wide receiver. Really never took that step that we thought he could maybe potentially do this year for the Chargers. Quentin Johnston, again, looked better. Much better than his rookie year, but continues to deal with drops. And he dealt with some pretty bad ones this past season here. And tight end wise, again, Will Disley was a fine tight end. Could have been better. But again, he's just a fine tight end. But let's get into some of the bigger questions here for this Chargers team here. And starting off with the first one here, where do you stand with JK Dobbins? Now, JK Dobbins, obviously coming off a almost 900-yard season here, 9 touchdown season. Obviously we know his history with his injuries. He obviously got hurt again this year, came back and still played, which was a really positive thing here. But he's a pending free agent. I don't think there's any word that the Chargers are going to bring this guy back no matter what. I'm sure that's been in discussions, but I don't know if it's a done deal case yet. And guy who's still in prime years, where do you stand, Coach Tyler, with J.K. Dobbins as a pending free agent in Dynasty?
Yeah, I'm honestly still off of J.K. Dobbins. I just, and this is another one of those, I played the Dobbins game for so long that it's like I've been burnt by the fire too many times. I'm scared to touch the flame. And so I was so impressed by Dobbins. We still haven't seen a full season from him in his career, but in 13 games, finally hit that 1K mark in total yards. Like you said, had the 9 touchdowns on the ground, which in a Harbaugh offense makes all the sense in the world. But I really don't see a situation where the Chargers aren't bringing another guy in. You know, they did have Gus Edwards, and that was really the presumed starter going into the season. Just as everything fell, Kamani Vidal was a later draft pick. He was kind of a sleeper and an underdog guy, and still ended up being the RB3 on this team. But JK Dobbins wasn't supposed to do what he did this season. But I also think Harbaugh understands he got his season out of JK Dobbins, and he signed him to a one-year deal, or the Chargers signed him to a one-year deal, and I think they made the right call. They helped him to boost his career, put up 1,000 total yards, and now he's going to go somewhere and, you know, go do something for another team. But
That's
I think
is he going to go to another team? That's a good question.
I believe he's going to go to another team. I think Harbaugh, with his, you know, his head to run it, I think he's going to bring in one of these, you know, higher end rookie running backs. It's obviously not going to be Ashton Genty unless they just really sell the farm on something to move up in the draft. But they're in a prime position to get, you know, an Amarion Hampton, a Travion Henderson, one of those guys. You know, they can pull the trigger early, and some people might see it as a reach, but also in a Harbaugh offense, a running back is not ever a reach, because we've seen what Harbaugh can do with plenty of running backs this most recent season being JK Dobbins. And so if he gets a young, talented back, he can mold him into whatever he wants him to be. So I am honestly off of JK Dobbins. I'm good to sell him. Even if he goes to another team, I don't see another team running the ball as efficiently as the Chargers do, without there already being a very, you know, marked guy as the RB1 and Dobbins just being a guy to step in behind. But in my mind, don't see Harbaugh bringing back Dobbins. Even if it is on a cheap deal, he did hit his 1,000 yards this year, so I think that that's going to play in his favor. And, you know, this extremely weak running back class is also going to play into his favor, that someone's going to need a running back somewhere. And so someone's going to pay some kind of money for him.
Yeah, no, Dobbins is someone I'm really like torn with, unfortunately, for Dynasty, because, you know, I think the talent has always been there. That's never been the question, but injury concerns is something that has always pegged me for like not wanting to touch JK Dobbins. You know, I went at him in a startup this offseason, and much earlier than I thought it would take him around. And after it did it, I'm like, I don't like this at all now. Now I'm thinking about it, like, I really don't like this, because where does he land? If it's not with the Chargers, you know, like I've heard the Broncos, I've heard the Raiders could be potential landing spots for him. Wouldn't be bad. But again, I'm scared of these running backs this free agency, unless NFL teams were like, whoa, look what happened last year with all these free agent running backs. They were dominant on when they came to their new team. Can that happen for these mediocre running backs, or, you know, above average running backs, whatever you want to call them? That is something that, like, is just like, does that mean J.K. Dobbins is going to have a high value? Does that mean he's not going to have a high value? You know, like, it is concerning with that sense. I think if you have him, you're kind of just holding him and hoping for the best. And if you want him, wait until he actually signs with the team. Again, I know people talk about the value of Dynasty, of getting him when they're at the cheapest, and J.K. Dobbins is probably relatively cheap still for a lot of Dynasty owners, but trading for a guy who doesn't have an NFL team is not something I really like to do, especially with a player like J.K. Dobbins. I think you just got to hold him for the best, because he's shown flashes of greatness, but he just needs to be with the right team, and hopefully he gets a opportunity once again to shine for another team in 2025. So, all right, over the next question here: will more talent hurt or help Ladd McConkey? Obviously, let me just pull that up real quick here with the Chargers this past season here. I just had all my notes set up. Here we go. For the Chargers this year, you're looking at 112 targets for Ladd McConkey. Took the Chargers like 6 weeks to realize, we can't just run the ball anymore. It's not 2010. We have to throw the ball more. Then you have 91 targets from Quentin Johnston, 67 from Joshua Palmer, 64 from Will Disley. And a lot of people are going to point to the Chargers as a destination for a lot of teams to, hey, they need a true wide receiver one or outside weapon threat, because obviously Ladd plays in the slot. are you concerned at all with Ladd's production moving forward? That if the Chargers bring someone in, that his value may not be as high, his production may not be there like we saw in the second half.
Yeah. I really think that it wouldn't hurt him as much as the guys that fall in behind. Quentin Johnston surprised me for sure. Very quietly put up 700 yards this season. And like you said, Josh Palmer just under 600. But there's a major drop off after that, at least at the receiver position. You have Will Dissly and Stone Smart, and they have guys at the tight end position, but no one that's really going to impede on the wide receivers' target shares. And so I really think that any more talent brought in only hurts a Quentin Johnston or a Josh Palmer more than it would hurt Ladd McConkey. He put up 112 targets and 82 receptions on those 112. I think that some of that those numbers could possibly drop, but those are ultimately repeatable when you look at Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer had 156 combined targets. If you take a decent chunk of those targets away and throw them, you say they bring in some alpha wide receiver one and he takes away 140 of those targets, Ladd McConkey is able to do the exact same thing on the same workload. That doesn't increase Herbert's workload. That doesn't increase how many times they're throwing the ball. They could put out the same offensive scheme, call all the same plays, and it's a repeatable season for Ladd McConkey. 1149, so just under 1150, and 7 receiving touchdowns is a outstanding rookie season. That's a great rookie season.
It really is.
And doing that on a team that was, pounding the table on, we're going to run the ball. We're going to draft Joe Alt wherever he was drafted in the last draft. We don't need, a receiver. We don't need any of these defensive players. We need a lineman because we're going to run the ball and we're going to be set. And it worked. But you sent out a rookie receiver to go put up 1,149 yards. And he was a guy that, as we talked about receivers last year, he was one of those guys that I said he's probably going to end up being a slot receiver. And that's not a discount to his talent. He's going to be an outstanding slot receiver. And he did move, inside, outside, everywhere. But we saw it work. And so I think that any talent brought in, it might diminish those target numbers just a little bit, just because of the fact that the wide receiver 3 is probably not going to get 100 or not going to get, 20, 30 targets behind Ladd McConkey and whoever else they'd bring in.
Right.
But I think this season and these, metrics are extremely repeatable, even if they bring someone in. It just hurts the guys like Quentin Johnston and Josh Palmer before it hurts a Ladd McConkey.
That is fair. And I agree with you, honestly. I mean, I know people always can say, well, is it going to make things worse? It might actually make things a little bit easier for him because he's not going to probably be the main number one focus at times if they do happen to bring in a talent to that level or better. Ladd's ability to do things after the catch is what made him really special this past season here. And having more open space downfield, having a true outside wide receiver spread the field to be an actual threat, unlike Quentin Johnston, I think will help Ladd McConkey moving forward. And again, if you look at Justin Herbert, he only averaged 29 attempts per game. You have to assume that will probably go up a little bit more, maybe closer to 35. So there's potential still to even see more targets in this offense. This team really changed their offensive ability in probably around game 6, 7 of the season here. And it was like, oh, okay, we need to start throwing the ball more and start getting more efficient in the passing game. And it worked. So I think Ladd will be fine, even with another top end talent coming onto the Chargers. All right, over to the next team, Green Bay Packers. Obviously, we started off with quarterback Jordan Love. Someone we'll talk about really shortly. Kind of an up and down season from him in his second full season. Running backs, Josh Jacobs was a tremendous talent for this team here. Really looked and took the next step in his game in a prime of his career. Marshawn Lloyd, the rookie this past season, didn't really get a chance to play. He's going to be hopefully coming back this year, seeing something if he can actually get some things going, because I think a lot of people did like him coming out the draft. Manuel Wilson filled in nicely as the backup. He is a pending free agent. Wide receiver wise, again, a position that we're going to talk about here in a shortly. Jaden Reed, the explosive big play wide receiver or explosive wide receiver for this, Packers offense. Romeo Dobbs has been that consistent factor, always on the field, always seeing decent production. Christian Watson hurt himself late in the season, likely will probably miss a good chunk of 2025 season. But big playability, downfield threat kind of wide receiver. Dontavian Wicks kind of is basically Christian Watson, but fills in for him when he's not playing on the field and does well at times. And then tight ends, Tucker Kraft really has stepped up and taken over this tight end backfield. But again, another year without Luke Musgrave last year, wondering if that guy ever gets going. Obviously, a lot of people were high on his receiving ability, just never really seemed to have worked out in his 2 years so far. And Tucker Kraft has taken full advantage of that opportunity here. So let's get into some fantasy questions here. And the first one we're starting off with here, is Jordan Love still a QB1 in Dynasty? I think a lot of people had him high, and I surely had him very high in my Dynasty board. And I still do relatively so. I think I still have him in the top 10 as a QB1. But, obviously kind of an up and down season from him really didn't help us as much as we wanted to, especially when it comes to playoff time for fantasy. Do you still believe that Jordan Love is that QB1 option in Dynasty? Or maybe you never did, and you're telling me that he's just a QB2?
I right now have Jordan Love sitting about my QB12 in my rankings. So he's right there as a QB1. But some of the guys behind him are guys that we either didn't see or barely saw last year, right? Like I still have Michael Penix behind him because we only got 3 games of Penix. And the past couple episodes, y'all have heard how highly I've talked about him and how much I think he's going to be a guy. So with more games, I fully believe Penix could move up and knock him out of that spot. JJ McCarthy, I still have him behind there. We're going to get into Sam Darnold in a little bit, but if JJ is really the guy in Minnesota and he has Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison and all these weapons, and they, Aaron Jones wasn't terrible, but they get a running back, he could easily go out and jump Jordan Love. You have the rookies coming in, right? It's not, we're not thinking it's going to be that either Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders is going to come out and be a top 5 guy immediately. But, maybe Shedeur links up with Malik Neighbors and the Giants go get a running back, and that offense is actually somewhat palatable. And he has a chance to jump him right there.
Yeah.
I have Love just right there on the edge. And I'm going to keep him there at 12 as of right now. But at the same time, just the guys that are behind him, there's obviously, older guys, less efficient guys. But at the same time, there's guys that are young that we either have seen minimal of or haven't seen anything out of, right? JJ's recovering. We got rookies coming in. Penix, we saw 3 games. Maybe Trevor Lawrence under Liam Cohen is able to be a quarterback. He's got Brian Thomas. He's got weapons around him. Maybe Liam Cohen makes him look like Baker Mayfield from last year. But right now, I very unsettlingly and very unsecurely have Jordan Love as my QB12. So he can still be a QB1, but it also wouldn't surprise me and wouldn't really hurt me to move him down in those rankings if any one of those guys behind him shows the flashes of what they're supposed to be and where they were drafted to be.
Yeah, no. Well, I still have Jordan Love relatively. I think he's still my QB7 right now. I think they do realize that they need to make sure that they have a threat in the passing game, and I think that they're going to work on that this offseason here. You even heard Josh Jacobs talk about, obviously, if you heard, they don't have a wide receiver 1 on this team. And I think it speaks for it because I don't think they truly have a wide receiver 1, a true wide receiver 1 who is a difference maker that will play 17 games for this team here. And I think that's where Jordan Love is lacking in terms of his ability to take his game to the next level, is that he doesn't have that guy here. You have Jordan Reed, who's a fantastic yardage after the catch wide receiver. Romeo Dobbs is a solid wide receiver 3 player. He's not elite, but he's fine. He's also disgruntled with the team right now. Christian Watson, he was supposed to be that guy. He can't stay healthy. And Dontavian Wicks, unfortunately, can't catch the ball for his life. But when it comes to Jordan Love, we saw Jordan Love do really well in the early portion of the season here. Looked really solid in the first 6 weeks, despite missing a few games there. Then he was QB 26 from week 7 on. And like, well, what happened there? And you just look at what's going on. Josh Jacobs just took over the backfield. They just ran the ball a ton, and he did what he had to do. He managed the game, but I think there's still more upside to his game that I think are being missed in this offense here. I mean, he was solid. I guess he wasn't good for fantasy, but he was solid. He didn't really cause any turnovers. It wasn't like he regressed in his his ability to process on the field there. He was someone that was like, oh, bad processing, turned the ball over a lot. Well, he had 1 pick after week 11. He did not turn the ball over, still threw a decent amount of touchdowns, but the upside wasn't there because they weren't throwing the ball a ton. So I think this is the time this offseason to go out there and find Jordan Love owners and see what the value is for him, because I still want him. This Packers team is going to continue to be good. They have a strong defense. They have a strong run game. Give this man a true weapon in the passing game that he can throw the ball to. He doesn't have that right now. You've seen some of these elite quarterbacks get their wide receiver 1 and be able to take that next step. Give him a T. Higgins. Give him a wide receiver 1 in the draft. Trade for somebody. Give him somebody that will produce an outside threat that will help Jordan Love reach that next level. And I think that will happen. And I still have him as a QB1. I still believe he's a QB1 right now in Dynasty. So, all right, over to the next question here. Will anyone, staying with the Packers offense, will anyone step up in Green Bay? And who I'm talking about is, will any of the wide receivers really step up? Will any of the I guess the tight ends can step up, but will they step up enough? Probably not. Mostly the wide receivers. Is there a wide receiver that, probably the only one we're really going to talk about is maybe Jordan Reed, but Coach Tyler, is there anyone that's really going to step up for Green Bay?
I really don't think so. I want to say this is something I said in the offseason, but the Packers really just have a team of wide receiver 2s and 3s that they're trying to all roll out there as wide receiver 1s. Jaden Reed, like you said, he's a great yards after the catch guy. He's not a wide receiver 1. Romeo Dobbs and Dontavian Wicks, not wide receiver 1s. Christian Watson, if that man could ever stay on the field, he has the ability to possibly be, a big play wide receiver 1. But even that, it's still in question. And so I think that if any of them are going to step up, it's going to be Jaden Reed. I don't know how much more he can step up, leading the team in targets and receptions and receiving yards. I think really the only course of action for the Packers would be to bring someone in, and that would technically move Jaden Reed down to the not best receiver on this team. But Jordan Love spreads the ball so well, and that's one thing that he does get. He does it extremely efficiently, but at the same time, he almost has to, because you have guys that won't play a full 17-game slate, even if, you give them all the opportunity in the world.
Well, if you look at this real quick, hold on. Per game basis, Christian Watson, 3.5 targets. Romeo Dobbs, 4.5 targets. Jaden Reed, 4.4 targets. Dontavian Wicks, 4.5 targets. And Justin Tucker, Tucker Kraft, 3.9 targets per game. So the ball does get spread around so much in that offense. Yeah. It's insane.
And it's frustrating if you're trying to make these guys, efficient on your fantasy rosters, because that, even if Jaden Reed is the best receiver out there, it doesn't matter, because he's going to get, almost like the numbers show, almost a basically scripted set of targets. And once he's used them, he can't use them anymore. And you look at this offense, Christian Watson, he's going to miss, presumably all of next season. He tore his ACL in week 18. That doesn't bode well unless the Packers, go to the Super Bowl, which with their current team, I don't put those odds very high. God, no. But, Christian Watson went out there and was 4th in targets and receptions. It was still 2nd on this team in receiving yards. There's just nothing that you can script or telegraph with this offense outside of Jaden Reed at the end of the season is going to lead them in the, big 3 wide receiver metrics. So I think unless they bring someone in, I don't know how anyone in this wide receiver room really flourishes outside of being able to stay on the field 17 games for the guys that aren't able to consistently do that. But I don't see a world where, anyone goes above the value that we kind of have them at now.
Yeah. I'm kind of on the same page. Like I'm hoping that still that Jayden Reed can figure it out at some point and they find a way to get him more involved in the offense here, because his talent really can be great giving the opportunity. Just there's a reason why. And maybe that should be concerning for dynasty owners right now. Like, again, I was offered the 112 in Parker Washington for Jayden Reed. I was like, I was torn on it because it's like, well, like, do I want to give up Jayden Reed? Does Jayden Reed still has a upside? And he does. So it's like, I think you have to just kind of hold Jayden Reed and hope that the Packers get things going. That the fact that Christian Watson isn't on the field and maybe they go out there and get a different veteran to kind of come in, help this young core, will help Jayden Reed maybe take another step. That's the only guy I could see happening. I don't see anyone else really taking that step here. It's Jayden Reed or nothing right now in this offense. Tucker Kraft's great for what he is as a tight end, but that's about it. All right, last team of the night here, Minnesota Vikings here. Minnesota has a whole bunch of quarterbacks on this roster. Well, it won't be anymore, but obviously Sam Darnold, just complete turnaround of his NFL career, had a fantastic season. Props to you, Sam Darnold, but he is a pending free agent as well. Don't know where he's going. JJ McCarthy is going to be the next man up there. If they don't bring back Sam Darnold, we don't know, but he's waiting in the wings. Daniel Jones, got cut from the Giants, signed with the Vikings. It seems like there's still kind of a market for Daniel Jones out there, but we'll have to wait and see. Running backs, Aaron Jones is a free agent, but it seems like he's a free agent, but it seems like there is mutual interest in him coming back. Cam Akers is also a free agent. He looked decent at times for both Houston and the Vikings. Another injury return guy, hopeful. So wide receiver wise, obviously Justin Jefferson is a top 2 fantasy wide receiver in Dynasty right now. Jordan Addison had a really great second half of the 2024 season here. Jalen Naylor is just kind of a wide receiver 3. TJ Hawkinson, came back after his injury, was fine. I think there's still a bounce back waiting for his season to come in 2025, because I think there's still that he's showed tremendous talent in that Vikings offense. So there's a lot of question marks, especially who's going to play quarterback for this team. But okay, we're not talking about the Vikings themselves. We're talking about the individual players. So starting us off at the top here, what is Sam Darnold's value? Obviously, a really fantastic season, 35 touchdowns, really good year out of him, looked fantastic. Young quarterback still, not as old as many people might think Sam Darnold is, but pending free agent. There's mutual interest coming back to the Vikings. I would obviously probably be ideal for a lot of people, but I've heard the Titans, I've heard the Giants, I've heard maybe even the Jets going after Sam Darnold here. What is his value for you moving forward? Or this right now?
Yeah, right now his value is so hard to tell. Just because, like you said, you don't know if he's going to be in Minnesota. If he is, it bodes extremely well for him. But if not, I don't see too many of these landing spots that he goes into an offense with either the weapons or the coaching that he had in Minnesota, right? Because Minnesota was the perfect storm. You have Kevin O'Connell, who's this great offensive mind. Pretty sure he won Coach of the Year this year for what he did with the Vikings.
Yes.
And so you have, a great coaching staff, an offensive-minded coach who put Darnold out there and put him in great situations. But you also had the talent, right? You have the, in my opinion, best receiver in the league. You can argue that with Jamar Chase, but after the season that he just had. But, full career look, Justin Jefferson's the best receiver in the league. And so you walk into an offense where you have the best receiver in the league, and then you have one of the best wide receiver 2s in Jordan Addison, right? And then that back stretch of the year, you get TJ Hawkinson back. And he's not 100%, but it's better than nothing. And then the offense, like I said, Aaron Jones was serviceable. Cam Akers added a little bit of juice, every couple times he touched the ball. But I just don't see really any situation that he walks into in free agency outside of, being outstanding for his wallet, that he gets either the coaching staff or the talent that he had in Minnesota. So I really think it would be in his best interest to go back to Minnesota. Really give McCarthy a year to fully heal and work. And if it turns into a Kirk Cousins, Michael Penix situation where Darnold just had his one Cinderella year and he starts to go down and they're like, okay, it's time to switch to McCarthy, and that's how it happens. That's how it happens. But I think Darnold's value not being in Minnesota severely diminishes what he's capable of, because you look back at, the teams that he was on where, he didn't have either the coaching or the talent, right? He was drafted by the Jets, number 3 overall, if I remember it right, 2018 draft.
Yes.
Yeah, he was drafted, top 3, and he was with the Jets, and the Jets didn't have any talent. The Jets didn't have any coaching. It was just the worst of both worlds, and that's how Darnold's career started, and that's what it was reflected as, right?
Yeah.
And he goes to Carolina, and it's Carolina. There's not much you can say outside of that. And then, gets out of Carolina, goes to be a backup for San Francisco, and doesn't really see the field, right? Under 50 passing attempts that entire season. So you walk into Minnesota, you have great coaching, you have outstanding talent. You've seen what bad coaching and bad talent around you does to your career, right? He's not one of those guys that can outplay the people around him.
Right.
And so even after this, career year, everyone thinks there's going to be this resurgence around Sam Darnold. I don't see a world in where his value isn't severely tanked if he's not back in Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm on the same page. It's either Minnesota or bust for me when it comes to Sam Darnold, and that's kind of why I'm still okay selling high if that high value is there for owners in my leagues, because while he was great, I still don't believe that Sam Darnold is going to just turn his career around and be this guy who is a top 10 dynasty, top 10 fantasy quarterback for the next 3 to 4 seasons here. I still think that teams will figure out how to defend Sam Darnold a little bit better. He's got to adjust to the game there. And they didn't have a really strong run game to run either. Their secondary was a mess last year. They had so many issues, unfortunate deaths, suspensions, arrests, injuries. There were so many things happening in that secondary that things just never got things going. If this Vikings team finds a run game, they find secondary help, does Sam Darnold need to be used as much there? Or does he really throw that many touchdown passes? The issue for me is he threw 12 interceptions again. He was a high interception guy, high turnover rate guy still, despite having a really good season here. And again, if he leaves, I want nothing to do with Sam Darnold, because I think the talent is based on the scheme. And if it's not within this Kevin O'Connell offense, I don't want any part of it. And the Titans, the Giants, maybe the Giants, but still not even the Giants, probably the Raiders, maybe. I don't want Sam Darnold in that case there. So if I can sell high, I'm absolutely selling high. Whether or not he goes back to Minnesota, I'm okay selling high on that value and trying to get the most from it. Unless you really need a quarterback, obviously a contending team might want to hold on to him. But as you're rebuilding, or if you happen to get lucky, I have Sam Darnold. I'm selling high for what I can. All right, last but not least, last question of the night here. Of course, Jordan Addison. Is Jordan Addison's breakout in 2020, second half breakout in 2025 sustainable? Obviously, and I wrote this comment here. I was like, Jordan Addison just dominated this year without looking at the actual stats. Never do that, kids. He actually didn't even do much better than his rookie season. But with Jordan Addison, it was he was wide receiver 10 from week 11 on. He just dominated the last 7 games of the season, had 7 touchdowns, had 60-plus yards in 4 of the 6 games, had 8 or more targets in 6 of the last 7 games. He just dominated in that back half there, which kind of propped his season, because before that, he was wide receiver 47 through 10 games. But does that second half prove that Jordan Addison can be a, top 20, top 25 wide receiver for an entire season? Do you believe it's sustainable for an entire year, Coach Tyler?
I believe it is sustainable. This is another, it ties back. I think it's really only sustainable if Sam Darnold is the quarterback. I don't think McCarthy is going to throw the ball as much as Darnold does. I don't think he's going to throw it necessarily as well or efficiently as Darnold does. And so I really tie that breakout to Sam Darnold, right? Obviously, Jordan Addison is, a great talent. Like I said, he's one of the best wide receiver twos in the league. He is, the Vikings version of a Devonta Smith. Because if Jordan Addison went to a decent amount of teams, he would have the ability to be a wide receiver one. But like you said in the last after week 11, I want to say you said he was quarter or wide receiver 10.
Yes.
We see two wide receiver, we see a wide receiver 1 and a wide receiver 3 week, but we see a lot of wide receiver, 22, 24, 26, 29 mixed in there. But then there's also wide receiver 46 and wide receiver 109 finishes in there. And so I really think that Addison, a lot of that breakout is tied to Sam Darnold. And with, you had TJ Hawkinson back on the field, but he was nowhere near 100% with a guy like Justin Jefferson on the opposite side of you. Obviously, defenses are going to focus on him, but the dude still finds a way to get open. It doesn't matter. And so with a presumably 100% TJ Hawkinson coming back, with Justin Jefferson on the other side of the field of you, if JJ is the guy next year, if McCarthy's the guy and he goes out and he's not throwing the ball as much as Darnold does, that hurts Addison more than anyone. Because, you look at McCarthy, he was able to hit a tight end very well in college. He could hit a check down if he needed to. And if you have Justin Jefferson, you put it anywhere in his vicinity and there's a very high likelihood he's coming down with it.
Sure.
And so it hurts Addison's value. So I think that the answer to that is going to be directly tied to who's his quarterback. He is currently 23 years old, so he still has age on his side. But I doubt the Vikings are ever going to get rid of Justin Jefferson. I doubt, that JJ McCarthy is going to come in and be a QB1 who's thrown for 5,000 yards a year, and Jordan Addison is the guy that's benefiting off of that. And so it really ties so much to Darnold for me.
Yeah, I know. I'm okay with Jordan Addison. I think there's still upside in his game. Do I believe it's going to be sustainable, what he showed us at the end of last year? Probably not. I mean, he's going to have peaks and valleys because he's going to be the wide receiver too. For me, he's scoring a lot of touchdowns too for his first 2 seasons, getting very involved in the touchdowns, which always won in fantasy. Good as a flex option, good as a wide receiver too, because if you're not going to get the targets in the yards, you better be getting the touchdowns at least. And he's been doing very well when it comes to touchdowns, 19 over his first 2 seasons. I love that. And I don't think it necessarily needs to be Sam Darnold playing quarterback that Jordan Addison will lose his value. I mean, we saw last year, he played with Kirk Cousins. He played with Nick Mullins. He played with whoever else that the Vikings had in their quarterback room last year. He played with players, other quarterbacks. So I think I think it's just what this offensive scheme is. And it's a really good offensive scheme, and it's quarterback friendly, which will help these wide receivers. So whether it's McCarthy or Darnold or even someone else in this quarterback room, I think Jordan Addison will have a niche that you're going to find in Dynasty that is a good wide receiver 3, good flex option. Now, will he be will he have one of those seasons where he's a wide receiver one with Justin Jefferson? Probably not. Maybe so, but probably not. But he's still going to be a really good wide receiver that you should be able to want on your Dynasty roster and be pretty happy that he's going to offer you, most weeks, top 36, top 24 value at times. So I don't think it's sustainable, but I think his value is going to be a little up and down as you move forward, as long as Justin Jefferson is the wide receiver 1 in Minnesota right now. So, but that's all I have to say about him. So, but that is going to wrap up our slideshow for the night, our show for the night, actually. So, really great show from everyone tonight here. Me and Coach Tyler here. It's only 2 of us, but we thank you guys all for tuning in, listening as always. Coach Tyler, is there anything you want to say before I wrap us up for the night?
Yeah, guys, go check out dynastynerds.com. That's where me and Coach Steve met. We talk about it every show. And it's because they have a lot of stuff that is worth talking about, especially at this time in your dynasty off seasons. The Dynasty GM is an elite tool to have, right? You're able to go in, you're able to look at trades throughout every league that is uploaded to the Dynasty Nerds, GM website. You can go through and look at trades. You've got values on every player for whatever type of league you are in. And it helps you a lot as you're making these trades, whether before or after the draft. It's combine week. You're going to get a lot of numbers and a lot of guys that get hyped up when their favorite player runs a 4.4 and they want to trade everything in the world for a pick to go get them. So they have the Dynasty GM, a place where I'm going to spend a lot of time, a place where we're going to spend a lot of time going forward as we get these testing numbers and as we prep for our drafts, is the Dynasty Film Room. And
Right.
so, jump in that Dynasty Film Room. Our editors do a great job with their all 22s in there, getting all the film in that you could ever want to watch. Probably more hours in there than you could ever watch before your draft. And so go check out Dynasty Nerds. When you get over there, use code COACH. Lets them know that we sent you. And just want to thank y'all for listening.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. And again, we appreciate you for tuning in as always, guys. We we love to just help you guys out. That's why we do this. We don't get paid to do it, guys. So as always, if you're new to our channel, please like and subscribe. We're going to continue to do these really great hour shows each and every single week. We're going to eventually get into some free agency talk. Eventually, at the end of March, we'll get into some rookie talk. We'll talk about the draft. We'll talk about post-draft, rookie drafts, all those fun things to kind of help you get through your dynasty offseason here. And if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we appreciate you guys for listening in as well. But always, if you want to know more visual effects, see what our faces look like, please go check out our YouTube channel as well. Until next time, guys, we'll be back to finish up the rest of the teams, most of the teams who finished in the divisional round or later, and giving those dynasty important questions a run through. So we thank you guys all for listening and tune in. Until next time, everyone.